Bibles to the book of Genesis. And when you turn to Genesis chapter 32, and we had been working our way through the book of Acts, and our intent as we worked through the book of Acts was to get a fresh look and discover, again, the very simple things of what the church originally was and how God established the church, in what manner he established it, what things he put there. And we made it to Acts chapter 13, and we did two sermons, one on verse 1, and then John did verses 2 and 3 yesterday. And then from there on, it becomes a historical record of the launching of the gospel to the other nations. And so we've gone through the foundation of the church, and so we're going to depart from the book of Acts for a season of time and begin looking at some other things. We've just been in the book of Acts for a long time. So I want you to look in Genesis chapter 32, please. And we have a long passage here to read before we speak about it. So follow along with me as I read Genesis chapter 32. Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp." So he called the name of that place Mahanaim. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother in the land of Seir, the country of Edom, instructing them, "Thus you shall say to my lord Esau, Thus says your servant Jacob, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, male servants, and female servants. I have sent to tell my lord in order that I may find favor in your sight." And the messenger returned to Jacob, saying, "We came to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you, and there are 400 men with him." Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. He divided the people who were with him and the flocks and herds and camels into two camps, thinking, "If Esau comes to the one camp and attacks it, then the camp that is left will escape." Then Jacob said, "O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, 'Return to your country and to your kindred, that I may do you good,' I am not worthy of the least of all the deeds of the steadfast love and all of the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become two camps. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, that he may come and attack me, the mothers with the children. But you said, I will surely do you good and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude." So he stayed there that night, and from what he had with him, he took a present for his brother Esau. Would you notice the present that he sends? 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milking camels and their calves, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. These he handed over to his servants, every drove by itself, and said to his servants, "Pass on ahead of me and put a space between drove and drove." He instructed the first, "When Esau my brother meets you and asks, 'To whom do you belong, and where are you going, and whose are these ahead of you?' then you shall say, 'They belong to your servant Jacob. They are a present sent to my lord Esau, and moreover he is behind us.' He likewise instructed the second and the third and all who followed the droves. You shall say the same thing to Esau when you find him. And you shall say, moreover, your servant Jacob is behind us, for he thought, I may appease him with the present that goes ahead of me. And afterwards I shall see his face. Perhaps he will accept me." So the present passed on ahead of him, and he himself stayed that night in the camp. The same night he rose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day has broken." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And he said, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered." The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh that is on his hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew of his thigh. A couple of things that jump out at me right away. One of them is Jacob is not a hero yet. When we think of the heroes of the faith listed in Hebrews chapter 11, Jacob's name is listed there in one little sentence. But here at this moment in his life, he is not a hero yet. He is not a hero of faith. Jacob is filled with fear, although God has said to him that God was going to bless him and bring him back safely. In fact, God instructed him in the other country, "It's time for you to go home. You go home, and I'm going to make sure you get home." And yet Jacob is sending some extremely expensive gifts, trying to appease his brother. He's doing everything that he can to survive something that he's terrified of. He's not a hero yet. Jacob still has much to learn. When we contrast that with Abraham, remember that the Bible tells us that Abraham is a man of faith from the beginning. God says to Abraham, "Hey, get up and leave your family and leave your home and go." These amazing words happen in the Bible. It says, "So Abraham left." What kind of person does that? Excuse me, God, where are we going? How much are the tolls? Do I have enough money to pay the tolls? What are we going to do when we get there? God said, so Abraham got up and started walking. He's a hero of the faith right there. When the king of Sodom says to him, "Let me give you all this money. You've had this great victory. Let me give you all this money." And Abraham gives 10% of all of his plunder to Melchizedek, this priest and king. And it was right after that that God comes to him and reaffirms the covenant with him. That's a man of faith. Now, he's faithful when God says, "Take your son, your only son whom you love, and take him to worship, take him to sacrifice him." And again it says, "So in the morning Abraham got up." That's a hero of faith, because he knows that God is going to intervene. That's a true hero. What about Jacob? Not so much. Not so much. First of all, his brother comes hungry from the field. And instead of just sharing with his flesh and blood the stew that's sitting right in front of him that came from his father's flocks, he immediately starts conniving. He takes advantage of his brother's weakness. That's not a hero of faith. That's a capitalist. Not that there's anything wrong with being a capitalist. I'm just, do you see? And then, in order to get the blessing, he follows his mother's directions, and he deceives his poor, aged, blind father. He's not listed in the book of Hebrew for that. When he takes his staff and he has to run from his brother's going to murder him. And he encounters God for the first time. He makes a deal with God. "If you'll take care of me, I'll give you a tenth of everything I own." That's not a hero of faith. We see then he lives in his relative's house, and he begins manipulating everything. It's not only that he's going to get blessed and he's going to get more livestock, but he manipulates all the livestock so that his uncle gets less. It's not a hero of faith. The way that he treats his sons. The way he treats his sons is horrible. This is a very dysfunctional family. One is the favorite with the coat of many colors. And the others are jealous. It's not a hero of faith. When the famine comes and he sends his sons to Egypt and says, see if you can get some food because we're all going to die. And then the youngest, Benjamin, is taken. Jacob is like, it would be better that you all died. That's not a hero of faith. Nevertheless, in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 21, it says this, by faith Jacob, when dying, blessed each of his sons of Joseph, bowing in worship over the head of his staff, by faith. At the end of his life, as he died, it's the last event before he lays on the bed, pulls up his feet under the covers, and breathes his last. Finally, he's a hero of faith. So when you look at Joseph, here's a guy who's faithful all the way through. David has his ups and downs. Jacob does not become a man of faith until right at the end. So we don't look at the things that he does and go, wow, you know what? Let me start cooking some stew because I really like my brother's house. In fact, this time that we see here is a time of great fear for Jacob. Even though he has met God face to face more than once, he's heard from God in dreams and visions, he's been promised things by God, still he's terrified. Let's continue the story in Genesis chapter 33. Then Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau was coming, and 400 men with him. Let me just pause for a moment there. Do you get the scene? He sent his wives, he sent his servants, he sent his flocks, and Esau is still coming. Esau, with his little army, has passed the first drove and the second drove and the third drove. Esau has passed all of Jacob's possessions, and he's still coming. Do you know what kind of dust cloud 400 men make as they're headed towards you? So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the two female servants, and he put the servants with their children in front. Maybe he'll have mercy on the kids. And then Leah with her children, and Rachel and Joseph last of all. He himself went on before them, bowing himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And when Esau lifted up his eyes and saw the women and children, he said, who are these with you? Jacob said, these children, or the children whom God has graciously given to your servant. Then the servants drew near, they and their children, and bowed down. Leah likewise and her children drew near and bowed down. And last, Joseph and Rachel drew near, and they bowed down. Esau said, what do you mean by all this company that I met? Jacob answered, to find favor in the sight of my Lord. But Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself. Jacob said, no, please, if I have found favor in your sight, then accept my present from my hand. For I have seen your face, which is like seeing the face of God, and you have accepted me. Now, if I remember right, Esau is hairy and red. I think this is flattery. In the other places, Esau is not described as a handsome guy. He says, please accept my blessing that is brought to you because God has dealt graciously with me and because I have enough. Thus he urged him, and he took it. Then Esau said, let us journey on our way, and I will go ahead of you. But Jacob said to him, my Lord knows that the children are frail, and that the nursing flocks and herds are a care to me. If they are driven hard for one day, all the flocks will die. Let my Lord pass on ahead of his servant, and I will lead on slowly at the pace of the livestock that are ahead of me, and at the pace of the children, until I come to my Lord in Seir. So Esau said, let me leave with you some of the people who are with me. But he said, what need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord. So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. But Jacob journeyed to Succoth, and built himself a house, and made booths for his livestock. Therefore the name of the place is called Succoth. And Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, on his way from Paddan Aram and he camped before the city. And from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, he bought up for 100 pieces of money the piece of land on which he had pinched his tent, and there he erected an altar called El Olehe Israel. There are some passages of Scripture, some stories in the Bible that when you read them, you go, what's the point? What was this all about? So that we know why Jewish people don't eat the hip? I mean, is that the point? God, you've recorded this. What am I supposed to learn here? What's the purpose of all this? What are you trying to teach us, Lord? What's with all of the gifts and all of the pandering and all of the flattery? If he's just going to end up at Shechem, what was this all about? He separated. Was this about reconciliation? No, because then he lies to his brother again and goes, oh, I'll catch up with you. I'll come to Sarah. But he goes to Shechem. It's not about reconciliation. What's the deal with him wrestling with this man? And then after he wrestled with him, why is he continuing to bow like this to Esau? And I'm not going to tell you that I figured out all that we're supposed to learn from this chapter, but I'm going to share with you a few things I see. And once I saw them, it began to speak volumes of who God is, and what his ways are like, and who I am in God, and perhaps most importantly, how I should respond to him and his ways as revealed here. So just stay with me as I bring out a couple of things here. First of all, I want us to go all the way back to the beginning of Jacob and Esau. So while you've got your Bible open to Genesis, go ahead and turn back to Genesis chapter 25. And we're going to see where it all starts. And if you'll look at Genesis chapter 25, and we're just going to look at verses 20 through 23. It says, And Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Araman of Paddan Aram, the sister of Laban, the Aramean, to be his wife. And Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah his wife conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, If it is thus, why is this happening to me? So she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, the older shall serve the younger. So the first thing you have to understand about all that's taking place, it's not about 2 boys named Jacob and Esau, but it's about 2 nations. God has chosen that the older one will serve the younger. And here he's talking about nations. God has a plan. And he has decided that in his plan, one nation is going to be stronger than the other. The nation of Israel is going to be stronger than Edom. Romans chapter 9, verses 10 through 13 says this, And not only so, but also when Rebekah had conceived children by one man, our forefather Isaac, though they were not yet born, and had done nothing either good or bad in order that God's purpose of election might continue, not because of works, but because of him who calls, she was told, the older will serve the younger. As it is written, Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. This chapter is all about God getting to choose what he wants to choose. Now, here God has made up his mind. He's saying, here's going to be 2 boys. And both of these boys are going to have nations come out of them. And the descendants of the older son are going to serve the descendants of the younger son. That's what it's all about. Now, the next part of the story, we have humans doing all kinds of stuff, trying to get something done. So, if you think about it, think about the effort that Jacob and Rebekah are going through to try to accomplish what God has already promised. I don't know. Rebecca, she's the one who heard the prophecy, and she might be like Sarah saying, let's give God a hand. God's getting old. He may not be able to get this done. It seems to me like it's not getting done. I think I need to push God's agenda forward. But Jacob, I don't get that sense from him. From Jacob, I get the sense that this is just a really selfish, carnal guy trying to make his way to the top, and he doesn't care who he tramples on the way up there. And so they go to work. And what do we end up with this? Anyway, look at Genesis chapter 25 there, starting in verse 29, and we'll read through the verse 34. Once when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came from the field, and he was exhausted, and Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stew, for I'm exhausted." Therefore his name was called Edom. Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright now." Esau said, "I'm about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" And Jacob said, "Swear to me now." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went on his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Well, what is that? What is this birthright? The birthright automatically goes to the firstborn. Hundreds of years after this event, God is going to give a law to Israel. And in that law, the oldest son is going to receive a double portion of the inheritance. If you have 10 kids, you're going to divide it 11 ways. And the oldest son is going to get 2 pieces, and the rest are going to get the 1. Well, why? Because the oldest is also going to become the head of the clan, and he's going to have responsibilities. He is now the boss of the family. And there's going to be responsibilities that go with that, including taking care of his mother if she's still alive, but he's going to be the Lord over the other siblings in this family inheritance. That was the laws of Israel. This is long before God has given the laws of Israel, but already we see this issue in humanity before there ever is a nation of Israel, of a birthright. You have to consider this for a moment. Isaac is an extremely wealthy, powerful, nomadic chief. His father Abraham has gone to war against multiple kings and conquered them in battle. And the wealth of that plunder comes. And Abraham just continues in wealth, and he has a host of families with him. His own children, and then servants that he's hired, and people who join me, and he has alliances. He is like a small nation. Now Isaac is the king of that nation. The birthright is who's going to inherit the crown. Who's going to rule the family when dad dies? See, for us, when we look at it, Mitch has got a pretty good sized family, but still, it ain't hundreds. And so your oldest son, if he were to inherit, he inherits your mom and he inherits his grandma, but it's not hundreds of people. But that's what's going on here with Isaac and with Jacob and Esau. Jacob wants to be king. That's what the birthright is. Another thing I'd like you to consider is this. If Esau keeps the birthright, then Esau's son is going to be the next one in line. But Esau despises his birthright, and God despises Esau. Genesis chapter 27, verses 27 through 29 is about the blessing. So he came near and kissed him, and Isaac smelled the smell of his garments and blessed him and said, listen to the blessing that Isaac gives to Jacob. See, the smell of my son is the smell of the field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth and plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you and nations bow down to you. Notice, be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you. This is the blessing. Well, what is that about? Uh, let's take a look for a moment at this. The oldest son has the birthright. He has the right to be next in line. But the father has the power to suspend that and choose whoever he wants to. You see this played out when David is an old man. And if you'll just keep your finger in Genesis and turn to 1 Kings chapter 1. David's laying in bed. He's an old man. He's about to die. Now, he's got a son that's died. He's got another son that the family's a mess. And the next one in line, Adonijah, he decides, it's my right. It's my birthright. And although dad's not dead yet, he's in bed. He's not ruling. And so he makes himself king, and the army supports him, and he gets all of these people together. And in response to that, David is told that he has made himself king. And here's how David responds in 1 Kings 1, 32 through 34. King David said, "Call to me Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, and Benaniah the son of Jehoiada." So they came before the king, and the king said to them, "Take with you the servants of your Lord, and have Solomon, my son, ride on my own mule, and bring him down to Gihon. And let Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet there anoint him king over Israel. Then blow the trumpet and say, 'Long live the king of Solomon.'" There's the blessing. Adonijah, whatever his name is, he's got the birthright, but until David places the crown on the head, he can be supplanted. And that's exactly what David does. He places the crown on Solomon's head. And so although Esau has sold to Jacob the birthright, if dad blesses Esau and says, "Your brother's going to serve you," then Esau is going to be the head of the clan. Does everybody see that? And so Jacob and Rebekah go to work to make sure that doesn't happen. And sure enough, it doesn't happen. The blessing goes the other way. And so you see in Genesis chapter 27, now all that's left for Esau is verse 39 and 40 here. It says, Then Isaac his father answered and said to him, "Behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be." Would you notice that? Away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of the heaven on high. And by your sword shall you live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck. So there you have the birthright and the blessing. Okay, it's all in the right place, right? Rebekah and Jacob have got it sorted out. He's bought the birthright. They've worked out God's plan, right? Well, let's look at the results of all of their efforts. Genesis chapter 32, we just read in verse 9 and 10. Look again. And Jacob said, "O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, 'Return to your country and to your kindred, that I may do you good,' I am not worthy of the least of all the deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. Notice, for with only my staff I crossed the Jordan." What happened? He bought the birthright, which is a double inheritance. When he left the land, how much dollars did he take with him? 0. How many of Isaac's sheep and goats did he take with him? How many servants? 0. What did he take with him? A stick. What happened to all of Rebekah's helping God get this done? Comes to nothing. When he returns wealthy, but how much of Abraham's and Isaac's possession does he have? 0. Who has it? Esau has every camel, every donkey, every sheep. Rebekah and Jacob accomplished nothing. Well, what about the blessing? Remember, they got Isaac to bless Jacob and say, "You shall rule over your body," or your brother. Would you look there at Genesis chapter 33, verse 3? He himself, that's Jacob, went on before him, bowing to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. Who's Lord? The guy with 400 soldiers is Lord. What happened to the blessing? What has happened here, God? You had a lot of help. Rebekah helped. Jacob helped. And here he presents himself with nothing before his brother and calls him Lord. Why? Because the blessing and the birthright here was no concern of God at all. It was just something of men. All that had happened was just the traditions of men, and God was not concerned at all about what was going on there. In fact, what was he concerned at? Here's the you saw here. Here's the birthright. How did that work out? Here's the blessing. How did that work out? But now let's look at the covenant. In Genesis chapter 12, verses 2 and 3. And I will make of you, he says to Abraham, a great nation. And I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. There's the covenant with Abraham. Now, Abraham had 2 sons there. Abraham had Ishmael, and Abraham had Isaac. And God chose that covenant was not going to go to Ishmael, but that covenant was going to go to Isaac. In fact, Abraham begged God, but what about my son Ishmael? Okay, I'll take care of him too. But the covenant is going to Isaac. Genesis chapter 12, verses, in this covenant that he makes, he also then later tells him, and he also tells Isaac, and he also tells Jacob, these 2 parts of the covenant. I'm going to be your God. You're the one I've chosen. I'm going to be the God of your people. Your people are the one that I've chosen. And I'm going to give you this land. That's the covenant. Doesn't matter what Jacob and Esau and Rebekah are doing. Jacob is the one that God has chosen to extend the covenant to, not Esau. And Jacob still has the covenant. Head of the family was never the issue with God. Who would have the cows and the sheep was never the issue with God. The only thing that mattered to God was which one of these boys had he chosen to accomplish his will. In fact, Esau, although he gets all the cows and sheep, where is he living? He's living in the land of Seir, south of Israel. He's not in the land. Jacob is moving into the land. Esau's descendants don't inherit the land. Jacob's descendants are going to come out some 300 years later, and they're going to move into the land and possess it. And what the point do we get from this? Because remember, we're looking at this going, what is this all about? Is it just to find out why Jewish people don't eat hip sinew? Is it to find out that Jacob is going to be at Shechem, which God's going to move him from Shechem in the next story? What is this all about? And here's what I would like to share with you. Now you have the election. You are God's people. He's chosen you. Through the gospel, you responded. And you are in covenant with him. It doesn't matter about money. It doesn't matter about politics. It doesn't matter about political parties. It doesn't matter about the election, because you are the elect. And you are in covenant with God. And no matter what anybody does anywhere, no matter what they try to do anywhere, nothing will change the fact that you are God's child and he is your God. In Hebrews chapter 11, again. Verses 13 through 16. Are we putting it up on the board, guys? Yeah, you can look up here on the board. It says, these all died in faith. These heroes of faith that Jacob finally gets, like an add-on at the end. These heroes of faith. These all died in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. For people who speak thus make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. Notice, if they had been thinking of that land from which they had gone out, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. He's talking about you now. You have an inheritance so much greater than Jacob had. You have eternal life. And you will dwell in a new creation, a new heaven and a new earth for all of eternity. And God will always be your God, and you will always be his child forever and ever and ever. You have a much greater inheritance. Do you see that? But there's another part that goes with the election that I want to make sure you pay attention to. And we find this part of election, of what God was doing with Jacob rather than Esau, in Isaiah chapter 43, verse 10, which we'll put on the screen. He says, you are my witnesses. Who is his witness? The descendants of Jacob, this nation that God said is going to come out of Rebekah's womb. Out of Rebekah's womb are coming two nations. One will be stronger than the other. One will serve the other. Now we know through all of this election that it's Jacob and his descendants, and God changes Jacob's name to Israel, and so we call it the nation of Israel. And the prophet Isaiah, speaking to the nation of Israel, says, you are my witnesses, declares the Lord. And my servant whom I have chosen, notice that two things here, that you may know and believe me and understand that I am he. Before me no God was formed, nor shall there be any after me. In your election, just like with Israel, what have you come to know? You have come to know that Jesus Christ is the one true God. You have come to know that he has chosen you. You have come to know that you've put your faith. See, it's you know and you believe. You know and you believe. What does the Bible say? Whoever believes on the Lord Jesus Christ, whoever confesses him as Lord, shall be saved. I love the way Andrew Murray put it, his little discipleship course. I think, Tom, you read it. Andrew Murray says, the heart of man is like the temple. It's like the temple that you see in the Bible. The heart of man is like the temple. You have a gate. A piece of information comes at the beginning at the gate. You have this outer court and you have the inner court. In the outer court, the knowledge comes. But in the inner court, the Holy of Holies, that's where the law of God was. That you bring this piece of knowledge in, you bring in the gospel into the outer court, and there you meditate upon it, you hear it. But it's not until you believe that it moves into the inner court of your heart and becomes the law of your being. Israel knew some things. Israel knew that God was the creator. Israel knew that God had chosen them. Israel knew that God had given them a land. This is information that they knew. Some believed, some didn't. But do you understand the things that you know about God so far surpass what Israel knew about God in the book of Isaiah? Just like your inheritance of a heavenly or an earthly forever kingdom is going to surpass, it completely, totally surpasses this little strip of land on the eastern side of the Mediterranean Sea. The knowledge that you have of God surpasses. Jacob knew nothing about a cross standing on a hill. He knew nothing about the Son of God coming and offering his blood as a sacrifice for even Esau's descendants. He knew nothing about a resurrection and a conquering of death and a freedom from sin. Jacob knew nothing about that. His people, Israel, were going to be God's witness to what they knew. Witness to whom? Well, they would witness it themselves. They would see it. They would get the information and understand it. But they were also a light to the nations, God said. Well, as much as your inheritance is greater than Jacob, your witness is greater than his also, and you need to get on with it. With election comes responsibility. So you always have to finish the sentence. Elected for what? For the glory of God. Elected for what? To be a light to the lost around you. Because right now there's a door wide open that any who would believe may be saved. Any who would believe. Right now is the great harvest. See, they had all of these things they were thinking of doing. I want to get the birthright. Here's some stew. I want to get this. Here, put this hairy stuff on you and you can steal that. They were doing all kinds of man things. The whole time, God was doing God things. Don't waste your time doing man things. Get on with what God has called you to do. Get on with what He has chosen you to do. Because all of the rest of it is futile and will end up being nothing but dust and ashes. But the things of God are eternal. Romans chapter 11, verse 29, we'll put it on the board, says this. For the gift and calling of God are irrevocable. Just as God called Jacob, God called you. And your salvation is irrevocable. You are His and you have a destiny, and that's what you need to be focused on. I want to conclude with these thoughts because sometimes a question will be left hanging and people can't get the message because they're all wrapped up with the question. So let me deal with the question for a moment. It's a question that has bugged people, continues to bug people forever. It's a question that's never been answered satisfactorily as far as I'm concerned. And so we argue about it. But what about Esau? I mean, what's up with that, God? You're not even born and you just cast one off and choose the other? And one of the answers we give is God can do whatever He wants. And this is absolutely true, but I know this for sure. God is not a monster. He doesn't just flip coins. There's a mystery here. I'm just going to touch on it because there is no satisfactory answer that's ever been given, hence the word mystery. But I want you to look at Hebrews chapter 12 with me, verses 15 through 17. Do we have it for the board? Here we go. Look at this. See to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God. The first lesson you have to learn is this. I don't know about Esau, but God, please save me. I mean, could we just stop with that? I don't know what happened to Esau, but God, please don't let that happen to me. Could I please be yours? Let no one fail to obtain the grace of God, that no root of bitterness spring up and causes trouble, and by it many become defiled, that no one is sexually immoral or unholy like Esau, who sold his birthright for a single meal. For you know that afterward, when he desired to inherit the blessing, he was rejected. For he found no chance to repent, though he sought it with tears. Remember, he comes to his father, and his father goes, I already gave the blessing to your brother. And he wept. Please, could I have the blessing too? I've already done it. It's already done. And this is kind of hinting that the reason why God allowed that to happen is because what Esau did with the birthright. Now, here's the question. It says, go back to the last slide, please. He says, and by it many become defiled, that no one is sexually immoral, or, look here, unholy like Esau, who sold. Now, here's the question. Did Esau sell the possession, the birthright, because he was unholy, or is he unholy because he sold the birthright? Because remember, God knows the beginning from the end. Did God look into the future and go, that boy's going to sell the birthright, so I'm going to choose the other one? The mystery. Is Esau unholy because he sold his birthright, or did he sell his birthright because he's unholy? In other words, God rejected him at the beginning, so he's just going to be doomed to unholiness. Which is it? That's the mystery of election. I just know this: Esau despised his birthright. Don't do that. Kids, grew up in a Christian home. You have a birthright. You've heard the gospel. You've had your parents instruct you. Parents, you're just kids in God's eyes. Don't despise your birthright. Another thing I'd like you to consider is this. Esau married 2 Hittite girls. If the blessing had gone to him and he were the head of the nation, then his children would have been descendants of Hittites, and the Hittites were descendants of the Canaanites. The Hittites were the descendant of Canaan himself, who was cursed by Noah. And God didn't. Don't marry the wrong person. Don't sell your birthright. Don't marry the wrong person. Now, did he do it because God had cursed him, and so that's why he did it? Or did God curse him because he did it? The mystery of election. All I know is this: I ain't marrying a lost person. Not going to marry a cursed person. And I'm not going to throw away the birthright that has been given to me. That's what I know. What did you hear? Ask the worship team to make your way quietly up here. Did you hear anything today? Man can try to manipulate life, but God is always in charge. Okay, what else did we hear today? Don't marry the wrong person. Oh, wait, who said that? You're sitting next to your wife, so okay. All right. What were you saying, Tom? Are we okay with the mysteries? Some glad morning when this life is over. Or the other word is, we understand it better by and by, right?
What really stuck out to me was, I had never read that before, or noticed it, is when he fled,
Got nothing but a stick. Yeah.
all that work, and left him with nothing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. All right, let us worship him now with our offerings of praise, and also if you have set aside part of your provision for him, there are plates here and there's a plate back there